Hearing, it's setting it up, and it should be live here in just 1 second. I'll let you know when
It says it's streaming live now on YouTube.
okay. We should be good to go.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our South Weber City Council meeting of March 31st. It's 6 o'clock p.m. right now, and all council members are in attendance. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Petty, and then we'll have a prayer by Councilman Soderquist.
Please repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank thee for the opportunity to meet tonight as a city council and for city staff and of others online with our residents. We're grateful for this wonderful city in which we live. Grateful for the blessings that we have. Father, at this time, we are very much aware about the pandemic that is going on, and we pray that thou wilt stretch forth thy hand and provide a healing influence physically, emotionally, financially, and otherwise. Please bless those medical personnel that are on the front line, that they may be protected and be able to know the things to do. Bless those that are searching for the answer to stop it, to treat it, help inspire and guide and direct them that this can be short-lived. We pray now for thy blessings tonight as we discuss the things that are before us, that we may be able to communicate effectively, be able to share each other our thoughts and ideas. We're grateful for the input and the patience of our residents. I'm grateful for the opportunity again to serve them. And we ask for these things now in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Councilwoman Petty, Councilman Soderquist. First of all, I wanted to give you just a coronavirus update. Like I said in my statement to the city, there's no confirmed cases in South Weber City at this point that we're aware of. And of course, I just stress the directive of Governor Herbert that we stay safe and stay home. That's the best solution. And please practice social distancing 6 feet away from anyone you're speaking to or interacting with. We really appreciate that and hope to keep our city safe. So thank you for your compliance with that. Appreciate it. As far as public comment, so all comments all people who want to submit public comment, they must submit it by email to publiccomment@southwebercity.com. And if you're going to do this, if you want it in that night's council meeting, it needs to be received prior to the meeting start time. The subject line should include the meeting date, item number, and first and last name. And the comment with any comment out of first and last name will not be included in public comments. So in public record as public comment. So I just want to say a couple things while we're talking about public comment. I want to let the public know that we've heard you. We've read your emails. There's been a lot in the last few days. We've received a lot of public comment. Just to let you know that the system is working even with the current issues we're facing. The public still has the same access to council that they've always had, and possibly more now since we're all our other events and activities are on hold. Gives us more time to interact. I also wanted to say that please understand that there are no underlying motives of anyone on this council. No one is discreetly trying to rush anything through without listening to the public. The first meeting that we had to begin the general plan update actually took place on February 21st of 2019 with the Planning Commission. And so it's been well over a year that we've been working on this general plan. And we have listened to the public every step of the way. And I hope you felt that, because we have tried to respond to all of your comments. And we hear your concerns, and we'll discuss them more when that agenda item comes up. But I just wanted to start with those comments. So I appreciate your comments and appreciate the interaction that we have with you. We'll begin with our action items, and the first one is to approve the consent agenda. That includes the minutes of February 25th, 2020, March 10th, 2020, the check register for February, and the January budget to actual. And I believe we have some questions here, so I'll open it up now for that. Mark, have you looked at those comments?
Yeah, I can address them, the ones that I'm aware of. Some of them I may have to look up after the meeting. Says it appears to be a double billing by Crown Trophy. I'm not aware of that. I will look into that after the meeting. There was a billing from Jones and Associates. It says the question, it's renaming to Corona Drive to Mountainside. Question was, does not a street renaming require Planning Commission or City Council approval? That's not a financial question. I'm not sure how to answer that one. Brandon, can you take that one? Does
Sure.
The renaming of a street require Planning Commission or City Council approval?
It would require city council approval.
Okay. So it's on the billing because Brandon's done some work in preparation for that. And so that's why it was on the listing of checks. Says there's billings from both Keith Cap and Lane Cap. Both are listed as fourth of 4 installments for Easton Basin detention. There was actually 3 payments to the 3 brothers. The last payment was over, was about $13,000 and something, and there was 3 payments, 1 to each of the 3 brothers. Was what needed to be done there. The next item, it says, believe the charges for Office Depot were reversed. I'll look at that. A lot of times, like with Office Depot, there's multiple items bought and they'll just list the most expensive or put a general description for the supplies. So I can look to see what that is. Says questionable fuel charges on the F-550. There are 2 charges. We have 2 F-550s. And so the 2 one was the fuel for one of the trucks and the other was the fuel for the second F-550. Was there further questions on those?
Haley, did you have any other questions?
My same question was, I think you answered the caps. There's 2 installments of the exact same amount, one for Keith and one for Lane.
And there was also a 3rd brother that also received the same amount. The 4th payment was a total of, I think $13,000 and over $13,000. 3 equal payments to each of the 3 brothers involved in the development.
So is the 3rd brother that, I mean, there's just the 2 on this register. Is the 3rd brother on a different register then, or?
Probably. He might have,
Okay.
I'm not sure that they all were issued at the same time, but there was 3 checks
Gotcha.
issued.
Okay. That answered my
I see
question.
Angie's hand raised. Oh, sorry, Angie, do you have a question?
That's okay. Yes. I just wanted to address that. We did discuss renaming Cornea Drive. That was directed by the council several months ago. So that had already been taken care of.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, Haley, you got your questions answered. Are there any others?
Claire has his hand
Yeah.
raised.
I do on the general fund, the budget to actual. and maybe I was gonna bring it up later on too, but looking at where we're sitting on like our current year property taxes, our current revenue for sales tax, I think, have we started looking at what that possibly will decrease, Mark? Due to what's going now, I think that may be a whole nother discussion item, but I was surprised at how low some of our budgets to actual were on like our property taxes and stuff at this point.
We budget for the full amount and that's the way we legally have to put it in the budget, but not everybody pays on time. And so when you get, there's always some that comes in after the fact. And so that is at the time of this particular one, that's where we were, but it seems to trickle in sometimes for even a couple of years before on the same year. When you see the line item that says previous years, that's also money coming in from prior years' property tax when people are delinquent pay for it. Sales tax gets divided. 200,000 of the sales tax goes over to capital projects, and the other part is in the general fund. So if you're looking at sales tax, you need to look at both of them together.
Okay. So, and we can talk about the other later, but I do think it's something we need to look at, especially our sales and use tax coming in. That's our biggest income, and the states are reviewing their decrease that they're anticipating. I think we need to do the same.
Yeah, we're looking at that. We'll talk about it further. We have a work session coming up with the council. We'll look at it. It's hard to determine how much it's going to affect, but all the finance directors locally are all communicating with each other and saying, what do we do? And does anybody have a crystal ball of how bad it's going to be?
Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any other comments or questions? All right, then do I have a motion to approve the agenda? And Mark, will you look at those couple of things that you were just going to double check?
Yeah, I'll look at those after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I need to list each one of those, A, B, C, and D?
No.
Okay,
It's all together, so.
okay. Then I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda pending all the public comment received via the emails are added to the respective minutes.
Seconded.
Okay, a second. Any further comment? Then we'll have a roll call vote. Let's see, we'll just use the same order that we have when we're sitting in a row. And that would begin with, who's on that far end? Wayne's
Me.
on one end. So we'll start with Councilman Windsor.
Aye.
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 Oh, it's Blair. Okay. And the motion passes. So we will move to item number 6, which is resolution 2020-11, plan review services provider pool. And so this includes the award contract to West Coast Code Consultants Incorporated and Shums Coda Association. The council discussed the creation of a provider pool for plans review services on March 10th, 2020, which allows for the awarding of a contract to multiple companies for the same service. The city is then able to approach all companies in the provider pool when the service is needed and select who to receive the service from, dependent on the needs of the city at that time. The city advertised a plans review service request for qualifications and received 2 responses, Shums Coda and West Coast Code Consultants. An evaluation committee met on February 4th, 2020 to review the submittals. An evaluation of qualifications, reference checks, and personal experience with the established that both companies are qualified to complete the needed plans review work. Are there comments or questions on this? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve resolution?
Like I raised my hand, Mayor. You
Oh,
didn't-
I am so sorry, Wayne. I didn't look over at the side. Yes, go ahead.
Question for staff. In reading the contracts, being that they're a 5-year contract, there is no provision for any of their fee schedules to be increased from year to year. Do they understand that that fee schedule is now fixed for 5 years?
Both of the companies have reviewed the contract and are okay with it. So I must assume that they are okay with the terms being 5 years that way.
That would be my expectation, improving these contracts tonight, that the fee schedule is now fixed for 5 years.
Mine as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Other comments?
So just to make sure I understand this correctly, this cost of them reviewing your code gets passed on to the developer, is that correct?
Yeah, so when the developer submits their plans and those are reviewed by either of these companies, a third-party review, we receive it shows up in our budget in two places, as an expense and as a revenue. So it is a pass-through. The city does not pay for these costs when it is a development review.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Then do I have a motion to approve resolution 2020-11?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2020-11, the plan review services provider pool.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further comment? Then we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 All right, and the motion carries. All right, item number 7 is the Brumfield Wedding Chapel Condition Use Permit 19-02 291 West South Weaver Drive. So this item, and the council should have received the email on this. It's not ready for council consideration yet. There's still items that need to be worked out with staff. And so we will move on to the next item. And I see we have Chief Tolman here. So welcome, Chief. I'll just give a quick summary. We're looking at an ambulance purchase of $15,000 and a power gurney purchase of $34,890.65. The fire department's current ambulance is over 20 years old. They were looking at the cost of another ambulance and have quotes of $110,000 to $180,000. However, Roy's Fire Department is willing to sell an ambulance to our city for $15,000. This ambulance is 5 years old and has less than 100,000 miles on it. They rotate their fleet every 5 years and said they would be willing to have a continuing agreement to give our city the choice to purchase when they rotate. This purchase would come from vehicle replacement line item 45-57-740 in the fire department's budget. And then the fire department has also been looking at buying a power gurney. Back injuries are the #1 injury that ends the career of firefighters. Most of these injuries occur while lifting, loading, and unloading patients. So information on the injury facts, workers' compensation statistics, as well as quotes from 2 power gurney suppliers were contained in your packet. And I will open up for questions or comments now.
I know on the Public Safety Committee, and we talked about these briefly, but maybe Derek wants to fill everybody in on, or Mark, of where this money's coming from and how we're paying for those things. I think the ambulance is obviously a very good one, but we can explain to you where it was budgeted and where that's coming out of.
Yes, every year $85,000 gets put into a vehicle replacement plan for the fire department. So the ambulance money, we have money from last year and that went in. So we have 85,000, which would obviously easily cover the cost of the ambulance. And then we had some big projects this year, getting some bottles and doing the roof of the fire station, both of which we saved a substantial amount of money on. And we're hoping the money saved on those will pay for most of the gurney. So it's not, the gurney's not a budgeted item. I was planning on budgeting it for this next coming year. But this opportunity came up and I think it'd be a mistake to miss it.
Can I add one thing on that? As was said, the ambulance portion would come out of the vehicle replacement. The gurney portion, although it wasn't budgeted, as Chief Tolman said, we're saving some money on some other projects. However, the gurney would end up needing to be come out of fund balance from the general fund. When we say that we've saved money, the way that the budget works is that it's a bottom line budget. So if we've saved money in the fire department, the idea is that we could use some of that to go toward this gurney purchase. And then if we don't save enough to pay for it, then the remainder would come out of fund balance. The question right now is how much would have to come out of fund balance. We think that we can reduce the amount over the remainder of the fiscal year. But the idea, the baseline is that we'd pay for the gurney out of fund balance and then hopefully reduce that amount by savings throughout this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Soderquist.
Yeah, Chief Tolman, just a quick question on the gurney. Did we get multiple quotes, or is there just one supplier for this? How does it compare to other options that are out there?
So there's two manufacturers that manufacture the power gurneys, and we got quotes from both of them. I thought both of those were included in the packet. One from Sterno and one from Stryker, and the Stryker one was several $1,000s cheaper than the one from Inferno, not Sterno, Inferno. So we tried to get 3 quotes, but they're the 2 suppliers in the country.
All right,
So,
thank you.
mhm.
Here we go. Councilman Windsor.
Chief, couple questions. The existing ambulance we got less than 3 years ago, what makes it such that it needs to be replaced now? Are the maintenance costs going through the roof? It's just because it's old and this is a good deal that we can't pass up? And 2, when we made the move to get that ambulance, it was purported to bring in over $100,000 of revenue annually by its use, and we haven't seen that yet. So I'm having trouble as we go down this path that we're constantly having to sink more and more money into these services. What's the plan for the existing ambulance if we were to approve this purchase tonight?
The existing ambulance would go into reserve, and honestly, that's the big motivation. So the current ambulance is a 1998. It still runs fine. It still operates fine. We've had to have it into the shop several times for repairs and maintenance. And it hasn't been astronomical in the fact that we only paid $5,000. It's still a bargain, even with what we have put into it. But the times where we have had to have it in the shop or have somebody come to the fire station and service it, we don't have anything to run out of at that point. So then I'm stuck calling other cities and saying, hey, can you cover our city while our current ambulance is getting serviced or getting repaired or getting tires put on it, go down the list of just the maintenance. And so when this opportunity came up and I started asking around other chiefs all throughout northern Utah saying, hey, do any of you have any ambulances that you're looking to sell soon, trying to find us a good deal? And I feel like the Roy deals, especially with it being 5 years old and under 100,000 miles, that's an ambulance that's going to last us a lot longer than a 1998. But as far as anything being wrong with the current ambulance, it's not. It's just more or less a ticking time bomb. But that could be a 5-year, there's just no way to tell. But this just gives us a backup. The current ambulance would go into backup status.
So just a follow-up question, as I understand, this is a opportunity to provide redundancy within the safety system that we have today. Moving forward, is it possible for staff to prepare a fleet replacement plan or vehicle replacement plan so we can see prospectively how often we might be incurring these costs? If it's going to be every 5 years and then cycle through to every year, every 5 years, or I don't need an answer tonight, but I think that would help us in managing our expectations moving forward. Is what's your vehicle replacement program? I know the $85,000 was to go for the bigger trucks and the replacement program, so we're kind of term perspective. Just my
I don't know if the council received it, but I put together a 10-year capital projects, and in that 10-year capital projects form, it spells out the years and the estimated costs for vehicle replacement.
That's something staff can get their hands on, Mayor.
I might have it. I can look real quick.
Yeah, we're working toward a vehicle replacement plan, not just for fire, but across the city. The fire's the farthest down the road in terms of having that. And they have identified the anticipated years, the anticipated budget years that there would need to be vehicle replacement. So there's been some preparation on that already. It's just not in a finalized format, but we can absolutely share those anticipated costs.
Councilwoman Alberts, did you have a question?
Yeah, so with the ambulance, will you be keeping both vehicles then, I'm assuming, or how does that work?
Correct. That gives us a backup. So truly, if we had to put the new one, in to get new tires and to get oil changes, we would run out of the current ambulance.
Okay,
So
and then what, is there any additional charges or costs that are gonna come up, new tires on the new vehicle or a paint job or anything like that we're not seeing here?
we're not going to paint it. We are going to relabel it, which we're required to do by law. We have to label it South Weaver. So we're not driving around in an ambulance that says Roy Fire on it. It does need tires. As far as a cost for tires, I haven't figured out a cost yet, but it's really only the front 2 steer tires that need to be swapped out. And I don't imagine that being astronomical. They just put 2 drive tires on the steer tires. And so they said it's a rough ride. So realistically, we could even just keep them on there if all it is a matter of comfort.
Okay. And then the power gurney, so does it stay with the ambulance, or is it something that can be moved to a different ambulance, or how does it work?
It can be moved to a new ambulance. In fact, they're keeping theirs, unfortunately. They moved theirs already into their new ambulance. The power gurney system would be something that we could keep for a really long time.
Okay. And then you mentioned that we were able to save money on the roof and the air pack bottles. It looks like the roof was budgeted $30,000 and the air pack bottles were about $40,000. Do you know how much lower than that we're sitting?
So the roof, I believe we came about $7,000 under.
Okay.
The air pack bottles, I know we were significantly lower there. I couldn't tell you the exact number offhand, but we did save quite a bit of money on the air packs as well. I thought it was 29,000 was budgeted, and I think we spent right around 16, 17, if my memory's correct.
Okay. So it's showing 40,000 in the budget for equipment upgrades. Is that the only one would be for those air pack bottles, or is there other upgrades that will be coming?
So that line item isn't just for the air packs, that's the equipment throughout the year, whether it's turnouts for the guys or repairs and stuff on the vehicles. So that's not, that 40,000 is not air bottle specific.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Petty.
So just a follow-up question on the ambulance. How much will it cost to equip that ambulance? Because I know when we approved the purchase of our current ambulance, it was the ambulance, and then of course there's a lot of supplies that go into that. So how much will it cost to stock that as well?
It's going to honestly be really cheap. And the reason why is all the expensive stuff is stuff that we would move from the one ambulance onto the other ambulance. So we don't need to buy a new monitor. If we had to go into the reserve, we would take that with us. We don't need to buy any of the main equipment that we use on all of our calls. We would move that into the ambulance and take it with us. So really it'd be Band-Aids, some towels and some blankets, which we don't pay for. We just get from the hospital. It'd be the back would be pretty minimally stocked. And that way, if we need to switch out, we just grab our main equipment, which is mobile anyways, and move it into the other ambulance. So there's not going to be any astronomical startup costs. In fact, most of the supplies we already have in our medical supply room. So it'd be pretty easy to maintain that.
Okay. And then one follow-up question on this gurney. I can see the need for it to a degree to help save everybody's back. I get that, but can you sell me on it? Because I'm trying to decide if this is a need or a want.
So the biggest sell, I guess, would be there's a couple routes. I did send some information in the packet with some links to talk about back injuries and how much that would cost the city. So there's the aspect of financially, if we had a back injury, what would it cost? There's the aspect of all of our guys are career firefighters somewhere else, with the exception of a few. And if if they were to have their career ended because of an injury they sustained at South Weaver, that would be, personally, I would be mad. You know, I'm at my full-time job right now, and I would hate to have my career ended because I was lifting a heavy person and my back went out. So obviously there's that aspect of, you know, the personal reasons. As far as it being a want, I don't even think you can, I think because of the current NFPA standards, you can only buy used ones. They're not even manufacturing new ones because of the NFPA standards to protect our backs. So is it something we could get by without? Sure we can. It's just a matter of, you know, are we willing to do it on the backs of our guys? No pun intended. It's just a matter of, you know, look, if there's some big people in town, and if we're lifting a 600-pound person and there's 2 of us on scene, I mean, you can do the math. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Councilman Windsor.
Chief, I'm having problems similar with the gurney in that it wasn't appropriately appropriated in this year's budget. I know we're trying to make do and make it fit. Would the pricing that has been proposed be held or be still available come July 1st or this summer? And we could put this as a procured item on next year's budget so it's appropriately appropriated or properly appropriated. And if the budget is approved, then go make the procurement. I think it'd be more supportive of something that was planned, budgeted, and then approved. Could you wait 5 months?
Yeah, we can wait 5 months on the gurney. And as far as the cost difference, I can reach out to them, and I don't have an answer offhand. Usually the quotes they give you are good for 90 days is usually what they put on there. But I can definitely reach out to them. And most of the time, if you tell them, hey, this is a deal breaker, they're usually pretty flexible with you. The ambulance, Roy is, I know you asked specifically about the gurney, but Roy's looking to just get rid of it as soon as they can because it's just taking up space for them. So yeah, we can get the ambulance and then wait to put the gurney in until next budget year. There's no reason why we couldn't do that.
Thank you for your response.
And just to be transparent too, there's 2 aspects to the power load system. We can go kind of the 50% route and get a power gurney that doesn't have the auto load feature, and that's going to it's going to cut the cost pretty significantly. So that is an option if there's a lot of heartburn over the auto load system, and that makes it a deal breaker. You know, cutting that cost and still getting a gurney that at least has a power gurney and not the auto load feature. Hopefully we could consider that if we don't want to go with the whole package.
How much is significant savings on that?
I don't know if we can pull up the quote. I don't know who can do that, but it'd be like $14,000 cheaper, 14 to 15,000. So
Here we go with the code.
Is the power load the Furno one? That
no, so Stryker and Inferno have something that's mounted in the ambulance that actually hooks to the gurney and lifts the patient into the ambulance. You can get a gurney where the legs are power, so you can clip the gurney in and then both of you can come and hold it. And so that way, at least you have 2 people holding it. But without that power feature on the gurney, you only have one person that lifts because the other person has to bend down and pick the legs up. And so you have that one person committed to holding that all the weight on that gurney because the other person can't help lift because the legs don't come up by themselves. And so it's a matter of, do we want an ambulance where the ambulance loads the person in for us? If not, then we can go this cheaper route, which 2 people lifting is better than 1. And it's not as strenuous, obviously, because you have twice the amount of help. So
I'm assuming everybody saw what Dave was pointing out there, that the one quote's good till December and the other one's till June. Yeah, so I mean, from my standpoint, I agree with Wayne. I would actually like to see that we try to put it in the budget and actually budget for the better system than to try to shortcut it. And I'd rather see us wait 5 months and get what we should get instead of piecing it together now. Wouldn't you prefer that, Chief?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I'm totally okay with waiting. We just figured, bringing them together kind of helps explain the use a little bit better. But yeah, as far as waiting to make the purchase, there's no urgency as far as it needs to be done today, or there's no option to buy. So that's definitely doable.
I feel like that would be wise, especially if we can kind of see what this, what our revenue from sales and things will be doing. It'd be wise to maybe postpone on that for a bit.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? I just have one, Chief. So these ambulances would not be able to be used simultaneously.
They could be if we had the staff.
Even if they're not fully equipped?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Great point.
Okay, just.
Yeah. Yeah, if we wanted to run 2 ambulances at the same time, that's the reason that I didn't even bring that up is we don't have the staffing to run 2 ambulances at the same time. So there's no reason to equip 2 ambulances.
Right.
So that's the reason why that wasn't even presented as an option.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Any further questions? Okay, we'll handle these separately then. We'll begin with the ambulance purchase of $15,000. Do I have a motion to approve, table, or deny the ambulance purchase?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the purchase of the ambulance for $15,000 from Roy.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilman Windsor. Any further comments? Then we'll have a roll call vote beginning with Councilman Windsor.
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. All right.
And do the other one.
Do you want to do the other one?
Oh, yeah, hello. Do I have a motion to approve, table, or deny the power gurney purchase of $34,890.65?
I'd make a motion to table it and see if we can put it on the 2021 budget.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
Councilman
Sorry, Haley.
Halverson? All right.
You beat me.
Any further comment on that? Let's have a roll call vote beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
Yeah, aye. Aye. That's nice.
Aye for Quinn.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the motion carries. All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chief. Appreciate your time.
Mhm.
All right. We'll move into our discussion items. The first one is the general plan open house format. The city's original plan for holding an open house on April 8th and 9th to kick off the second round of public comment for the general plan needs to be altered due to the necessary response to the coronavirus. The city strongly desires to hear from as many people as possible regarding the second draft and wishes to alter the open house format in order to accommodate the need for social distancing while also creating opportunities to discuss the draft with the public and answer any questions individuals may have. So 4 ideas for that would be to hold the open house as scheduled, but only allow a limited number of people in the building at the same time and disinfect discussion areas after each timed conversation. We could also schedule individual times to meet in person, in small groups, or individually with a member of the council and planning commission. Another idea is schedule individual times for the public to meet over Zoom with a member of the council and planning commission. And one more is to take questions over email and provide answers through email. Frequently ask questions on the city website or through a video. All right, so let's open that up for discussion.
Okay. Can I go then?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. All right. I typed up a little something. So we've had a lot of response, and I know what I'm going to say is not going to be popular, but I want people to hear me out before they I just want people to process it, okay? And I wrote it so I don't mess up my words. We are in new territory. We're quarantined in our homes. We're working from home. We're teaching at home. We're not to leave unless we have to. And this seems very restrictive, as we all know. But we have adapted. We can telecommute. We can do business online, just like we are right now. We have used the Zoom platform to get our city business done. The city has to continue running. We cannot shut the city down and halt all operations because of this pandemic. We have received many emails with concerned citizens regarding the city general plan update. Many have expressed their fear of their voice not being heard or agendas being pushed through without being able to have a chance to ask questions. The facts are this: we're all quarantined, we cannot congregate, and we cannot stop the city from running. How many people are working from home? And why did your employer choose to have you work from home instead of shut down entirely? So think about that. Many people have lost their jobs. Many residents are small business owners, and we understand that. And I feel that those who are affected by this in that way should be the most sympathetic. I don't think anyone wants to lose their job or their income. Most everyone wants to go back to their regular routine. I don't understand why so many are calling for the city to stop functioning entirely. These are your tax dollars that run the city. Why would you want to shut it down? It honestly boggles my mind. I want to state for the record, I have no agenda with the general plan update. I truly don't think that anyone on the city council has an agenda with the general plan, except to do what's best for the city. Some have claimed otherwise, so I just want to set that record straight. Also, I've done some research as to how many hours the staff has spent working on the general plan. Using conservative numbers with missing information, which is key information that I'm missing, I've reached an astonishing price tag for the general plan process of approximately $50,000, and I think it's actually closer to 75. This is before we do a second round of the survey. The longer the city leaves this process open, the more we hemorrhage money, and I'm not comfortable with spending any more of your money on this process. So please understand, while there is no rush to get this done, because there's not, there is fiscal responsibility in wrapping up the process. I don't feel that it is wise to delay it any further. Obviously, we have ways of being reached, as the mayor just mentioned. Phone calls, emails, messaging, these options that we have for a different format of an open house. There are plenty who have electronically congregated already, so it can be done. We're not asking to push this through. I'm not asking to push this through. No one's asking to push this through while people are distracted, because we understand it is a distracting time right now. But quite the contrary, we're trying to continue to do business as usual, just like many of you have expressed you would like your lives to get back to. And with so many ways to complete the survey online, like most of the surveys were completed, Zoom meetings and video chats with friends and neighbors, there's no justification for stating that anyone is being censored or that their concerns are not being heard or their voice is unheard. So regardless of what is decided with the open house situation and the general plan survey process, please know I want to truly be fiscally responsible with your tax money, with our precious city resources. I don't have an agenda. I don't have ulterior motives. I just want to keep them moving along, business as usual. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Petty. I believe Councilwoman Alberts.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts for sure on this. And, you know, I feel like I've listened to a lot of minutes over the years, audio from this council and from previous councils. And one thing that is common is this question of how do we get the public more involved? And there was never really much of an answer to that, and nothing really came to fruition. And right now we have a very involved public. Probably the most involved public that we have in any city in the state. And our general public has listened to countless hours of meetings. And That's whether they've been at City Hall, if they've been listening with earbuds while driving home from work or taking care of their kids. Many more walked the streets. I think we had over 60 volunteers that walked the streets during this first survey to place information on people's doors so they knew how to participate and how to be involved and how to be informed, regardless of what their personal views were. In fact, as soon as we released our schedule a couple weeks ago, those citizens were already getting ready. They were already gathering together to make sure that everybody in the city could be informed and could be covered and knew that it was happening. And there's a reason why we had 600 surveys returned. It's because of those citizens. Those citizens were out there walking the streets. It's because we had people was reaching out to the people in a scale that the city, we cannot do that. But under the directive from the governor that's happening right now, they can't do that either. They can't walk the streets. They can't pass out flyers. They can't hold the open houses they were hoping to be able for those who couldn't make it to the public open houses, because we actually already had people saying, I can't make that. How can I find out more? And so we're relying heavily on online options. In fact, we all got an email not too long before this meeting started of somebody who did not know that this was all happening and mentioned that they, we have to be able to reach out to people other than just the online versions. And I feel like the population that we're counting on to stay home, the most vulnerable ones, is the same population that's probably the least comfortable with the online options. And there's a chance that, these options that we're listing here won't work for them. And even just coming down to City Hall to get a written survey right now is difficult for them and could be considered hazardous right now. So I echo what Andrew said. Right now, people are in a lot of stress. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their families. They're worried about their health, their welfare. They're trying to work from home. They're trying to do schooling from home. We are in a quarantine on a scale that we have never seen. And we have told the public numerous times that we will wait. We will take as long as we need. And I feel like it's right now under these circumstances that are so challenging that we're telling them that we're going to go ahead and just push through it. We got to hurry up and get it done. And I cannot disagree with that more. I feel like the public has worked very hard to be informed, and the public has worked very hard to be involved. And right now, they are not able to be as involved as they would wish to be because of the situation that we're under with the quarantine and a pandemic. So, if the general plan is taking up this much time of the city's time, then I say we put a pause button on it and we just postpone this until we can focus on, we can use that time to focus on things that have been on pause because we've been working on the general plan. And I think that we have told the public repeatedly that we will take all the time we need. And now we are trying to find alternate routes to get it done. And I find that, like I said, the options at the table are just not options that may work for all the people who would like to be involved. And I have to say, it feels a bit like a bait and switch, in my opinion. And it's a slap in the face to the citizens who want to be involved. There's a reason they're angry. They have every right to be. I would be angry too. So I feel really there's only one really great option right now when it comes to this general plan, and that is to postpone it until the quarantine is lifted and we are able to convene as a public body again. And we can work on other city business for the time being. I just want to say that any gains that we have made with the public this far will be lost if we choose to go forward with the general plan in a time such as this. That's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Looks like Councilman Windsor and then Councilman.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't write down my comments, so I'm not gonna be long. Thanks, Haley. I echo everything you said. I think there's a fifth option that wasn't put in the background memo, and that is press the pause button. If we press the pause button, there is no more money being spent to promote capital facilities plans or to do anything more. The need and or the passion for the public to have open houses as part of the public response period is so they can look us in the eye. They can ask us direct questions and maybe get further explanation as to why this or why that, or maybe further explanation as to the logic behind whatever it might be, sensitive lands, roads, trails, whatever it might be, so that it will better enable them to complete the survey and get a more comprehensive response. I think we still need to talk about the survey questions, and that's probably the second half of this discussion. But moving forward with open houses, I think we do need to have open houses, and I think it's appropriate to have them once the quarantine is lifted and we can congregate as a public, so we can give them the opportunity. If they want to vet, they want to gripe for whatever it is, want to gripe, fine. Frankly, we should have been done with this in the first go around. We had enough input, we had enough information that we could have made decisions. For whatever reason, we chose not to. We chose to provide further clarification. I think we got a great document. The only reason I can hear for postponing or not postponing and pushing through is to benefit maybe a few landowners who are anxious to move forward with some development. My response to that is let them move forward. Let them use the 2014 plan to base upon what it is they want to do and run the risk of whatever the council's decision might be, or they could wait until this plan does get resolved. Like Haley and others said, there's no purpose to continue to rush this. We're not trying to rush it. We're just trying to make progress and complete it. I disagree with some of the other emails and statements that this is just a guideline. It's just a guideline. To me, that is undermining the value and the effort that we and the citizens have put into this. This is more than a guideline. This is the plan that marks the future and the vision of our city. And to say it's just a guideline that, oh, it's a go by, we don't necessarily have to follow it, I find that very disrespectful, and I find that very short-sighted. This is a very important plan. It's a very good document, much better than the documents we've had previous. And I think we owe it to everybody to give them that second opportunity to express their thoughts and or verify what questions they need answered so that they can then complete the written or the online survey.
Councilman Halverson.
Okay, I didn't, you broke up when you said my name. I didn't know if it was me or Quinn. I mean, I'm torn on this a little bit. I mean, I feel in many ways that we spent more time on this general plan than any general plan in the state of Utah. We have spent way more resources, and I've had several emails and two or three phone calls stating the fact that we've spent too much money on this general plan also. So if that's the sentiment of people, and there's only the option of either pausing to stop spending money or get it approved right now, I would say we pause it. But I also think that people need to realize, like Wayne just stated, we're going to live with the 2014 general plan as it sits, which has everything on it that the people who have sent me 70 emails don't want. And so they need to realize that's what's in play right now. Is we will be, Brandon and the city and Dave, they'll be reviewing plans that come into the city based on the 2014 plan. And if that's what we want to do, that's what I mean, I think that's the decision we're making if we hit the pause button, because we don't know if this can go 2 more months or 6 months or a year. I think if it does go longer than just a couple months, we need to readdress finishing this general plan, regardless of our circumstances, because that will be a long-term circumstance we need to deal with and that we need to address. I personally don't have a problem with putting the survey out there. I've told several people I don't have a problem putting the survey out there and continuing the survey itself. We don't have to have an end time to the survey. And when the quarantine's lifted or when whatever we decide how we want to proceed after the end of April or whatever date we want to give it, then we can change, set open houses. I think the open houses would be a good thing. I know we did promise the people open houses. And so we should live up to that. But circumstances obviously have changed that none of us could foresee. If this goes long-term and we're not allowed to, we may have to make a different decision, or make a decision to take a vote and leave the general plan till 2021 and start this process over again and just go with what we have approved now and stop the general plan and stay with 14s. The people did a decent job then. There were some mistakes but that's what we're living with today. So that's, I'm torn on which way to go, but I'm waiting for someone to sway my decision.
Thank you, Councilman Haverson. Councilman Soderquist.
Thank you. A lot of my thoughts have been voiced by several of the councilmen already. I agree with postponing so that we can have the open house and face-to-face that people want. I would reiterate, nobody is trying to rush this through. There's no secret agendas. I went back and re-listened to the end of our last meeting, and it sounded like it was more, what was our plan? We can't have open houses with the current things. And I didn't take it the way a lot of people took it, but we want to get everybody's input. And I agree with that. And there, as Haley mentioned, there are some in the community that are not tied in technology wise, and we would miss them. But also I agree with what Blair's saying. If this goes on 3-4 months, or whatever, we need to revisit it. And, do we need to be creative and find some way to do it? But for now, at this point, I don't see a need to rush through and pursue any of these alternative options at this point. There's nothing that I see negative of us living with what we currently have. We kind of have an idea where we want to go. We've received a lot of feedback from the public. So as developers come in based off of the 2014 plan, we'll have to make decisions going forward based off of what we think the future is going to be. But I support delaying and waiting until we can have some face-to-face. But at the same time, if it looks like it's going to go on forever, then we revisit this and say, is there some way that we can still meet those needs?
Okay, thank you. Councilman Soderquist. I feel a lot of everything this council is feeling. I see every point that's been made, and I've been torn back and forth as well. One thing that has really hit home is there are a lot of emails about the connection to Layton. And I just want to say this and get it out in the open. And I feel bad that all the council members have to hear these things over and over again. First of all, that was not my baby. It's been on the plan for 20 years. And there was a reason for that. And we need to look at that reason and evaluate if it still is a good reason, or if it's not. There's a considerable number more residents that desired a connection on the last survey than desired South Bench Drive, and it was kind of connected to South Bench Drive. All I requested is that it be on its own, stand alone, so that we can get a more accurate picture of if people really want it or don't. If we find that that's the case, that people don't want it, then I'm resigned to pulling it from the plan. I'm okay with that. I don't have any more benefit than any of the rest of the public has for that. All I know is that I believe it would be a health and safety and a convenience factor for our city, and that is why I feel like it was a good idea. But if it's not wanted, we can pull it off. This is a working document. It changes probably every 5 or 6 years, and it could easily come back on again in the future or not. This is not a say all end all deal. It's simply an update to the plan, and a new council could get in and planning commission and completely change it. So and either way, I want to do what the public wants, and I want to do what the majority of the public wants. So please understand that I'm not going to force this on the general plan. I just wanted a more accurate picture of what the citizens want. Because there were a great number that did reach out to me and want the connection, and I don't want to just discount their opinions. So that is my comment. It looks like I don't know who was on there first, but Councilwoman Alberts and then Councilman Blair Halverson.
I think Blair, you were first, but you want to go or?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if we need to go back to the 2014. I'm not quite sure why that's the answer that we need to do. I think that we could easily just table it. If there is a developer that is frustrated that things can't happen right now because we're in quarantine, tell them to get in line. We're all dealing with things that we want to have happen right now that we've been told that we're going to have to wait on. So I think that we could easily just table this until May, when we have a little bit of better idea of what's going on with this quarantine. I'm not, anticipating a 8-10 month postponement, but I don't believe that we should go on right now, collecting even the surveys. And I think, it's really about the numbers. I just don't think that we're going to get as many people as involved this time as we did last time if we go forward during a quarantine. And those numbers are important to all of us, that we make sure that this plan that we have is very different than the plan that we had 6 months ago. And so I think it's worth it to make sure that we're able to get as many involved as possible. And I just don't know that can happen during a quarantine. And I don't think that postponing it 4 or 5 weeks is enough to warrant going back to a 2014 plan. Longer than that, yeah, maybe we could look at that option. I just don't know that we need to make that decision now.
I guess one of the questions I have for all the council members and the mayor is, do we have any, I don't think it costs us much money the survey has some questions that maybe we need to reword or something, because I've seen some good comments on those questions. But does it hurt to put the survey out there without a deadline and keep it open until we have an open house? There's a lot of people, obviously, that have time to respond by looking at the emails we received, and by all of the people sending me memes and things while they're sitting at home on quarantine. And I know what some of my employees are doing at home and playing basketball with their kids instead of working, have time to do some of these things. It's just a fact. Some people have time during this quarantine to do this more than they will when the quarantine is lifted. So does it hurt us to put the survey out with the questions fixed? However, I saw Haley had some suggestions on questions, and the survey takes, if you do the short version, it takes 30 seconds or whatever. I think we may get more respondents that we wouldn't get otherwise. And then we can have the people go around and door to door or whatever later on afterwards. But does that hurt us to just do the survey and let it sit there for a while?
And I agree with that, Councilman Halverson. Councilman Soderquist.
So I like the idea of getting more information out. My question on the survey is, what is the power of the survey in the end? If people are answering the survey now and then they find out information later that would change their response to the survey, do they get a chance to change their survey? Do we take surveys now just as a matter of information and then we send out a final survey later? Or, how does the survey fit into the weighting of the decisions? And then the second comment I have is just, even if we are delaying open houses, can we give some way for people that want to ask questions and want to get more details on it, so that we can have informal open house type discussions where somebody can call and contact the council members, call and contact, on a certain evening, saying, okay, anybody that wants to jump on, here's the Zoom meeting night, we'll talk about different aspects about it. So are there ways in this wait period that we're still able to educate our public and answer the questions and, calm some of their concerns. So if somebody could tell me the weighting power of the survey, that'd be good. And then the other is just a suggestion.
Dave, would you like to weigh in on this?
I thought you guys were doing fine. As far as the question about survey responses being able to be changed, yes, we have the functionality to leave it open so that if somebody wanted to edit their response, they could do that until the survey closed. We have all power with how we organize the survey, what questions we ask, how long we leave that open. We can leave, like I said, the option for people to amend their responses if that's what we wanted. The question of how much weight does the survey response have? Ultimately, I think that's up to each council member, how much they factor in public comment versus any other decision making or other factors that come to them, other information from various sources. So I think it's a major piece of the decision that each council member has to make, but ultimately that's up to each one on how you view the survey results. I would like to apologize. I think that some of the firestorm that the council has been feeling is probably because of me and the words that I used in a meeting and otherwise. So I apologize for that. Even the packet tonight and the frame that it took was this idea of trying to do business as much as we can, and how do we keep doing business considering the circumstances. I think the question of whether or not we pause is its own question, and that's not the question that I was trying to answer in framing the discussion. So I apologize for the creation of the firestorm on each of our council members and mayor's behalf. I know that you've received a lot of public comment, and I think that I was part of the generation of that based on my words. So I apologize for that. I think the intent from every council member I've talked to individually and expressed tonight is the desire to receive as much public feedback as possible, that it is an important piece of the feedback loop and the decision-making information that you all receive. So that's my frame. This is completely up to the city council. To answer Haley's question specific to reverting back to the general plan of 2014, that's automatic. That is our general plan right now. That's how we make decisions. And when we are in the process of updating the general plan, we have the ability to tell developers that we're working through that, and that doesn't necessarily change that we tell them that we're working through it, but to put it on pause and say we don't know when we're picking it back up, the only thing we can go by is our current general plan, which is on the books, which is the 2014 plan. I don't want to put words into Councilman Halverson's mouth, but it wasn't a decision that we say we prefer the 2014 plan over our current work. It's just the fact that that's what's on the books now, and that's how we would have to continue to operate when people ask us questions about what is our general plan. This whole time we've been telling people that that's our general plan, but we're in the midst of updating it. And we've tried to keep those developers that have been talking to us, those property owners, a handful of them. It's not just the big ones that are known that we've discussed in mixed use and others. There's a handful of property owners that have talked with staff about things that they want to do on their property. And the update of the general plan has been something that they've waited on. And that's not always easy for property owners. Sometimes they have the ability to wait. Sometimes they don't have the ability to wait. And when they're in limbo, that does affect them. So I'm not saying that they're the only ones affected by a pause. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are affected by our current circumstances that none of us wish were the case, and we're all trying to deal with it. But maybe you need to clarify that, Councilman Halverson, but that was my understanding of what you tried to say, is that we just simply have to go by what's currently on the books, since we're in the midst of updating and we would be putting a pause on it.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't word that right, but I just wanted everybody to be aware, and I know most of us here are, but not everybody realizes we have to go by the general plan that has been approved, and that's the 2014. So yeah, you said it better than I did.
Mayor, did you have any specific questions that you wanted me to answer when you asked me to weigh in?
So I'm wondering if we did, like Blair said, open the survey to those who would like to complete it now and continue to have it open. If somehow, I know we were going to put it out to some random residents to look at and give feedback on if they felt like it was user friendly, or things like that. Maybe we could add a question to that of how does this need more explanation? Did you find it, it could stand alone, or does it need, do you need help answering these questions somehow state something of that nature, so that we can determine if we need to do some of these or have an open house before we actually send out the
Well, if I understand what you're asking, we did go out for volunteer request of those that would be willing to review the survey tool itself, the questions, and provide any feedback on the questions themselves, not necessarily the general plan content, but we did receive a really good response on that. We have about, I want to say 31 individuals. It might have jumped up to 34, but I'd have to look at that. We have just over 30 individuals that have requested or put interest in, expressed their interest. So I haven't reached back out to that group yet. Was waiting to see what would happen here. My understanding was that that group would simply be another set of eyes on the creation of the survey tool itself, and that we would need to do that before we put that out to the entire public. So the timeline of that is completely up in the air right now, and that's why I haven't reached back out to those that have requested to be involved. So I was waiting to hear back from tonight or see what the result was of this evening before understanding the timeline of finalizing the survey instrument itself.
Right. So I don't really know what your answer was to my question. Could we include a question that's actually about whether the survey, I mean, I'm sure they'll give you feedback that would help it make it more that way. And that's a possibility too. We do have a couple of people wanting to comment, Councilwoman Alberts and then Councilman Windsor and Councilman Halverson. Did you have another comment as well? Mm-hmm. So we'll go in that order.
So I'm just thinking, I think there's two kind of options we could do here. We could continue on with the survey and keep it open until the public open houses can be convened again. But to Angie's point, I would assume that's going to take up city resources and costs again. So that's something to consider. That's all I can remember now. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Councilman Windsor.
I'll just be brief. I believe the commencement of the survey should be tied to the open houses and not the survey being concluded with the open houses. If you start the survey now and for some to have the open houses, we're going to be back in the same boat. So I think you wait when we're cleared to meet, then we have the open houses and commence the survey for however long we want it. 3 weeks, and then you're done.
Councilman Halverson.
I think that's kind of the question we need to have all the council decide. Do we move forward with the survey open-ended, and have everybody decide, or do we put a pause on it right now? I think we all need to make that decision, and before we even decide about what the survey contains, because if we're going to decide to pause it, we need to just pause it. If we're going to do the survey and leave it open-ended until we can do open houses, I guess we need to hear everybody's opinion and then make a decision from there. That's all I was getting at.
And Councilwoman Petty.
I am okay opening the survey up. That was kind of my point, which maybe I didn't make clear, is that to Blair's point, people have time. They could do the survey and we may get more responses. We may get less. I don't know, but there will be time for people to do surveys now. Like Haley said, that does open it up for resources. This general plan is costing a lot of money. That's my point. And I don't want anyone to feel like they're not being heard. I like the solutions that we came up with for open houses. To have a one-on-one with a council member to go over the survey is much more beneficial to someone than it is to have 5 tables set up and you may or may not get your question answered. So I felt like that was kind of a good solution, not that that was stifling people from letting their voice be heard. So I want to make that clear. I wasn't saying, you know, no open houses ever, never shut the doors, don't let anyone in. I was saying we have options instead of having a large open house open to the public. So that being said, I'm okay to open the survey and let people fill it out during this quarantine time. But we are living on the 2014, and the 2014 general plan does have things in there, like everyone said, that they don't like. And as a property owner, I'm not advocating for developers, but it would be similar to if a property owner wanted to build a shed on their property and we said, hang on, we're in the process of doing this, you can't build this. And then someone gets antsy because they want to build this shed, but we tell them no, and it's over a year in progress. It's kind of the similar thing, just on a grander scale if we have a developer coming in. And so I don't want to drag it out much longer. So I hope that that gives a little more clarification to what I was saying. I don't want anyone to feel like it's a bait and switch. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But with the amount of emails I've gotten, obviously people are able to communicate with us as well. That was my point. So I don't have an answer. I will go with whatever the council decides.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Alberts.
I think that we should keep the survey. I think a good option we could do is allow the beta test group to go ahead and work on it, and we can make sure that it makes sense. But I think that what Wayne brings up is a good point of waiting for it to be tied to when we can convene as a public body again. And I think I'm just really hopeful that in a few weeks we will have a little bit more direction as to how long this is going to be. And I think in a few weeks we will be able to make a better, clearer decision than we can at this point in time as to how long this may be going on for, is my hope, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're all in that boat for sure. Dave, what was I going to ask? Oh, how much does it cost to just continue to have the survey stay open? Is there a cost to that, or once you've got it online, it just stays there and there's not?
Yeah, once we pay a monthly subscription fee for the SurveyMonkey tool. So that won't change whether or not the survey's open or closed. We will be able to work on the tool itself. If we had time to work on it with a beta test group, we would have the ability to keep it open as long as needed. That doesn't create additional costs from a survey perspective. The cost I believe Angie is talking about is paying for staff time, paying for resource and things above and beyond just that monthly cost for the survey tool itself. When we do an open house, there's a cost to open house. When we publish flyers and submit them throughout the community, there's a cost to that. When we mail anything out, there's cost to that. Sometimes it's supplies, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's employees. There's just a cost to each of those actions. And if we pause it, in theory, then staff members aren't spending time on the general plan. They would be spending time on other projects. So in theory, you're not spending money on the general plan when you're not working on it. And I understand exactly how that works. There's not an additional cost to have the survey open.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Councilman Soderquist.
So just follow comment question on the survey, regardless of, when we decide to do it. I agree with the beta test team to actually look at it. I would ask that when that beta group does evaluate it, just double check to make sure that somebody could go in and change their answers, and how difficult is that? I've not seen a survey that allows that. And so it might be a little bit more complicated, but maybe somebody else has seen that. I just want to make sure that we understand how that option works before we roll it out. We may not want to, or even go that option or that direction, to have people be able to revise it if they learn something new later. But I'd just like to check that with the beta group, see if we can if it can be done and how difficult. Thanks.
Dave, can you look into that then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Councilman Soderquist, did you have something else?
No, I forgot to lower my hand, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Councilman Halverson.
I don't know. I guess we got to make a decision. I'm just wondering, I'm willing to throw it out there. If everybody wants to say no, they can say no. Do we continue on with I'll make the recommendation that we continue on with the beta testing. We have to do that regardless of when we do it. And whether we want to wait till that comes, I guess I'd make the recommendation when that comes back and the beta testing is done, we review the survey again, and then we make a decision if we're going to put it out. Because by then we may have an answer, like Haley said. I hope in 2 weeks we have an answer to this. We all do. I hope in 2 days we have an answer, but we won't. So I think that's the decision. I think we should just continue on with the beta testing and get it done and get the survey finalized, and then decide if we're going to put it out.
How does everyone feel about that? Maybe we could give thumbs up if you are okay with that, or if you want to make a comment.
It probably ought to be verbal.
Okay, so let's go through each of the council members, starting with Councilman Windsor.
Oh, sure. Start with me. So basically you're saying punt it, just get the beta test, get the survey complete, and then we'll revisit this whole discussion. So we're punting the decision.
If you want to put it in those terms, you bet. But it's not really, we got to do that anyway. We're not spending any money we wouldn't have spent 6 months down the road. And the beta testing is possibly going to take at least, I would say, 2 weeks. Dave, would you not agree?
Yeah, I think we'd want to give the residents enough time to really look at the tool, really look at the questions, and provide detailed feedback. I don't think we want to rush it. As I look back at the initial response, or at least the initial timeline that we put out, it may have been a little aggressive as far as the having 10 days for the beta test. We're obviously into that window already, and so that was all in preparation for the open house that was scheduled. But that timeline, I think, is completely blown up at this point. We're not working on a previous timeline. It's just, where do we want to go from today?
And I don't even think we can come up with an actual timeline. So, but it's going to take 2 weeks for the beta test. We may have like Haley said, we may have a whole different opinion in 2 weeks of what's going on. And I think that, yes. So in other words, yes, I'm punting it, but I think we may know a whole lot more in 2 weeks.
I guess I'm okay punting, assuming we can get a big enough group to draw from in order to do the beta test. If there's enough people willing to part some time.
Didn't you say you had over 30 volunteers so far?
Yes.
I didn't
And I
catch.
think we probably have a whole lot more than that listening tonight. So please volunteer. If
right.
we get as many volunteers, we got emails, you'll have plenty.
All right, so beta
What
test.
timing are we looking at? Are we thinking 2 weeks for the beta test or longer?
Well, if we're sampling 12 to 20 or whatever that number is, I can't imagine it would take more than 2 weeks, but 2 weeks is a pretty good time frame.
Okay.
Well, so questions, is the survey ready? Are we going to discuss the survey at all tonight, or is that?
No, the survey's not ready to go out right now. We
So what
put a draft together, and then I sent that out to the planning commission and to the city council, received comments back, and have been working to implement those comments. But we're not ready to send that out to the test group yet.
Okay, so what if
We could be within 2 days, we could be ready to send that out, but that's dependent on how much additional feedback this group has on the survey itself.
So what if we make a goal to have the survey ready for the beta test group by next Tuesday, April 7th? We let the beta testers have it until the 21st, and we review that information on the 28th. And by then, maybe we'll have a better directive of what we're doing with the going further.
I agree with that.
Councilwoman Petty.
I just wanted, Haley, could you just tell me that timeline again? I didn't have my calendar up, so I didn't follow
Yeah.
on your dates.
Yeah, so we shoot as a council and a planning commission to get all of our feedback back to Dave so that he can have it ready by the 7th. We start the beta testing about that time frame and give them till the 21st. Then we review their feedback and we meet on the 28th and discuss it from there. And perhaps by then we'll know what this quarantine is going to do for us.
Okay, sounds good. I can go with that.
And then at the 28th, if it looks like we're going to be quarantined longer, we can discuss whether to postpone the survey longer, or if it looks like maybe we can finally see each other again, we can have a party and do a big, like Cinco de Mayo public open house sort of thing.
Okay,
Okay.
Councilman Soderquist. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that. I can support that motion.
All right, then I'm taking it we're all in agreement. I would support that motion as well. Or it's not a motion, but that idea. So, all right, you have your direction then, Dave, correct?
Okay, we'll get the survey ready by the 7th, and then work on the beta test until the 21st. Be ready for a discussion on the 28th of how to proceed with the general plan.
Okay.
Just one question. There was a question on how many people we were going to have beta test it. So not everybody who requests to beta test it will be selected. It's a random selection. Is that correct?
Yes, the initial thought, and again, this could change, right? You tell me how you'd like to proceed. The initial plan was to have a handful of individuals. Recent conversation pushed that number to 10 to 12, to have 10 to 12 individuals that had been randomly selected to then review the survey. If you want that number to change, then now's the time to tell me as we prep for the 7th. But you're right.
I'm fine with that number, with whatever number. I mean, I'm fine with.
I'm good with that. Councilman Soderquist.
So my only comment or suggestion on the random selection is, can we look at who those people are, and if the age or demographic doesn't cover all the people that might be using that? I'd hate to have the random selection come out with everybody 20 to 30, and then we get feedback, that doesn't cover the whole spectrum. So I like the random, but I'd like it to be a conscious random, if that makes sense. So we don't let a computer foul up our decision-making because we didn't get enough feedback from everybody that's really going to use it.
So I have a crazy thought. I think when we were initially thinking of this beta test group, that it would be, something that could, like a focus group sort of thing. What if we just let the 32 something people that have sent in review it. If they're gonna have emails just come back and we're not meeting in person, is that too much feedback? Then we don't have to deal with the randomization, or I don't know, what are thoughts on that?
Dave?
That's up to the council. It's completely up to the council. When it comes to random selection, as soon as you start to manipulate it at all, it's no longer random. And then you're handpicking. The thought was, and even in the way that we've gone about this, it's not a true random sample. We're not trying to go for a statistically significant type of a sample here. We started with those that were interested, knowing that there would be some investment there. If we truly were going random, we wouldn't have even asked for volunteers. We'd just simply have a random selection of the entire city and select people. But the thought was that the council's really the one that's trying to determine the questions that they're trying to ask from the public. And we wanted people who were kind of coming at it cold, so to speak, to look at the tool and see, just like you said, Mayor, if it's confusing or if they need additional information or things like that. I'm not trying to say that you can't have as many people as you want. There is an element here where I think the idea of people answering the survey, we want as many people to answer the survey questions as possible. I don't think we need as many people as possible to be cooks in the kitchen to develop the tool itself. That really is up to the council of what questions you want to ask.
And I was going to just try to distinct. We're actually looking for feedback on the questions, not getting a response to the questions. I mean, it's not taking the survey. We want feedback on how clear it is, how concise it is, if it's understandable. So they actually need to have in their email that they send back to us those type of questions. Like the mayor was saying, it doesn't even have to be part of the survey. Those questions are separate. We don't care about the statistics we get back on the survey itself. We want, it's more of a proofread type thing for us. So
we're asking for answers.
I don't think it's that big a deal to just do a random selection off of the people you have coming in and get those feedback. Sorry.
I would agree too. And if you're going to have more people email you tonight or request that, just have a cutoff date and then randomly select, because then it is truly random. Because otherwise I would hate for anyone to feel like that was manipulated in any way.
What was the number we decided on for random tests?
I say 12.
Make it so.
I think 12 is a good number.
Make it so.
Okay.
Can I add one more update as far as the random process? Originally, the thought was to have this week into next week, from April 30th to April 7th, be the period that our beta test group would be able to look at it. With the things changing how they have, we haven't followed that timeline. But because that was the initial timeline, we did close off the volunteer request form. It is closed right now. If you want me to reopen that based on tonight's discussion, I can reopen that link so that we can have more people involved if they still want to express interest. If you'd like me to leave that open, even all the way until the 7th, while we're still working on the survey instrument, we can leave that open. I just had already previously closed it based on the prior timeline, which is now not what we're going by. So you tell me how long you want the volunteer request to be open, and that's what we'll do.
Does anyone have an opinion on that? I mean, I'm good either way.
Let's go the 7th. My thoughts.
I'll say the end of the week, but I can go with the 7th.
Agreed.
Okay.
How about the 6th?
Stop it, Angie. No,
I don't care. Whatever date works. End of the week or the 7th, I don't care.
I heard 3 people say the 7th, so I'll reopen that up as soon as this meeting ends, and then people will be able to continue to express interest in volunteering until the 7th.
All right, sounds good. If there are no further comments, and I don't see any, We will move on to the next item, which is the fiscal year 2021 budget workshop. And bear with me, this takes a little time, but I want it all to be on public record. Last fall, the City Council passed a significant property tax rate increase, the first in several decades. During the meetings and discussion over the tax increase, the council expressed a desire to not fall behind in such a significant way again. This would allow the general fund to have a more stable source of revenue and avoid the erosion of the city's buying power. Several ideas were discussed at the time. Now that we are preparing this year's budget, it's important to decide which philosophy the city would like to settle on moving forward. Most citizens have the misconception that property tax rates stay the same from year to year and that they pay more in property tax because their home value goes up. However, state of Utah law is designed around a declining property tax rate. As property values go up, a city's tax rate is automatically decreased. This means that if a city receives $300,000 in total property tax revenue in 2010, that city will only receive $300,000 in total property tax revenue in 2020. The city's overall property tax amount received only increases due to new growth within the city. The result is the city's buying power erodes over time as the property tax rate decreases. The method allowed by law for a city to adjust the tax rate, either to hold the same rate or to increase the rate, is to hold a truth in taxation hearing, which South Weaver did last year to increase the rate from the previous year. Every year, the city doesn't hold a truth in taxation hearing. They are accepting the automatic property tax rate decrease. The 100% rate increase last year brought the tax rate back to the same rate it was in the mid-1990s. Tonight, we're going to discuss three options for an ongoing property tax adjustment. Option one, which is a major tax rate adjustment. This has been South Weaver's past philosophy. Adopt the certified tax rate from the state. As property values go up, the tax rate goes down. No truth in taxation hearing is needed. The city's buying power slowly erodes until the point is reached where a rate increase is essential to just catch up. This option typically involves large rate increases after many years of rate decreases. Option number two, minor tax rate adjustments. Like option one, the city does not hold truth in taxation hearings and accepts the certified tax rate from the state. However, rather than wait an extended period, the city would plan on bringing back the tax rate to its current amount, or perhaps slightly above, every 3 to 5 years with a truth in taxation hearing. The tax rate would decrease for a few years, then be adjusted back up, followed by a decrease again for a few years, then an adjustment back up. And then option number three is no tax rate adjustments. The city goes through truth in taxation each year to hold the same tax rate year to year. Publicly, it is assumed this is what currently happens and goes to the misconception addressed above. The total amount the city would receive would be based on property value changes, not tax rate changes. Last year, many cities passed a significant increase, as we did, and are now implementing the new philosophy of an ongoing property tax. Although state law requires a truth in taxation hearing each year, over time, this becomes a simple philosophy for citizens to understand and accept. Okay, comments or questions? Wayne.
All right.
Councilman.
Yes. The reason why this was brought forward on the agenda today for discussion was the Finance and Administration Committee, in reviewing the draft budget that staff was preparing, noticed that staff had chosen an option, probably option three, and thought that that hadn't been decided and wanted to bring it back for the full council to at least discuss the approach that we go into the budgeting, putting together the public's budget. How do we go forward projecting tax revenues, and the three options that were presented there. That aside, my personal opinion is we cashed in a lot of public trust with the 100% tax increase last year, and to continue to ask for more money, no matter how you look at it, options 2 and 3 years or option 3 directly, is going to strain more of that trust and that confidence. I believe what we should direct staff to do in the budgeting process is just allow the rate to erode this year. Don't have a truth and taxation hearing, and then we come back and revisit this in 2 or 3 years as we can reestablish their trust and confidence in how we manage their money.
Councilman Soderquist, thank you, Councilman Windsor. Councilman Soderquist and then Councilwoman Alberts.
So thank you, Wayne. I appreciate him mentioning that, the reason it's on the discussion today. And I agree with Wayne completely as far as, I don't know that we want to have another truth and taxation this year, but I definitely don't want to go with option one. I've had discussions with our county auditor and our state auditor as to why the law is the way it is. Most individuals think that option three is really what happens, but it's not. And so there's a lot of confusion. But in my discussions with them, they say there's a reason why they did it the way they did. And people have tried to change it so that it automatically changes with the value of the house or the property, but it always gets shot down. So we won't get in that politics side of it. Personally, I lean more towards option two. If we can educate and help the public understand that this is trying to keep abreast of what our current tax rate is every 2, 3 to 5 years, then we just keep bouncing to try to stay where we need to be. But we get into a habit where we don't have to wait 10, 15, 20 years and then go through a big difficult process like occurred this last year. I'm also open with option three if people are willing to do that and understand it, every year. To me, there's some value with that. But I agree, let's see where things go with the next year or two and then proceed with, another discussion as to a tax increase potentially then.
Thank you, Councilwoman Alberts.
Thank you, council members Soderquist and Windsor. I feel much the same way. I think that Wayne basically took the words right out of my mouth. But I think that we could postpone this even just later on in this year. I feel like this time right now is just not a good time. I think that we should allow the public to have more time to digest this and chew on this. And when we can meet as a public body again, where they can give their comments on to how this will affect them, since it will. So I like the option of just postponing this, but I'm even fine just to look into this in a shorter time period if we feel it's necessary. But for Am I muted?
Yes.
Okay. How long was I muted for?
Just at the very end there.
Okay. I feel like we should direct staff to go forward with the same budget at the same tax rate we're currently at and look into this, bring this back up at a later date.
Okay. And thank you. And Councilman Halverson.
I just want to go back in time a little bit. And back to the election and everybody was asking these questions of me. I think the past councils since 1970 did a disservice to our city by staying with option number one for so long. I think we definitely need to address either going to option two as a philosophy or to option three. I don't have a problem waiting for a little while to do it. But I think it needs to be addressed and try to put in as some type of philosophy that the staff brings this up so that we don't get stuck in the position we were in, the last go round. So I don't want to just say, yes, we're going to raise taxes, but I think we need to consider option three because I like the idea of leaving a tax rate consistent unless we need to.
And Councilman Halverson, that I do not want to leave this for future councils to be stuck with the same thing we were, because that was very painful. And so I would agree with that. Let's, wait a little bit and then maybe look at 2 or 3 to move ahead with. I do like the idea of 3 eventually as well. Councilwoman Albert.
I just had a quick question. So pertaining to this, holding the dollar right now, if the economy tanks, we're going to receive the same dollar amount property taxes. But if we go to holding the rate, how does that happen if the economy tanks? Do we just go down with it, or like so from a planning perspective, holding the rate, it's kind of like the variable interest rate kind of sort of thing, right? Like you're just not entirely sure what you're going to get versus holding the dollar, you're going to get the same amount each time. But if this causes everything to tank, do we just write it down with it, or is there a point that we hold it? Does that make sense?
Who wants to answer that?
I think Mac's probably the resident expert on that, but you're absolutely right. In any formula, a basic formula is three numbers, right? In this case, you've got the property tax rate, the value of a home, and then that equals the amount that is paid in property tax, right? So each individual, each property is like that, but you could also look at that as a city as a whole. So if you're holding the rate and then the values change, that's going to give you your amount. Typically, property values go up. You're absolutely right. So if you're holding the rate, in theory, you're maintaining your tax rate and you're capturing inflation as property values go up. In the case that property values drop, then yes, your amount received would drop as well. But the reason a truth in taxation is held every year in relation to the rate is because typically this number is held. Not the property value number, the amount at the end is held, and they adjust the rate based on the value. So the value number comes in and they adjust the rate so that the amount received is the same. That's why property tax is very stable as an income stream, as a revenue stream for a city. If you look back over history, it hasn't changed a whole lot in the city. The only thing that changes is new growth, new homes, new property that's developed that increases that total amount received. However, every year, to Quinn's point, every year a city's required to look at this formula. And so the idea of a truth in taxation hearing every year to hold the rate, it's required to hold the rate. If you don't have a truth in taxation hearing, then the rate becomes the variable. And so we wouldn't have to hold a property tax truth in taxation hearing if you were in a down economy and you didn't want your dollar to change, the amount received to change. If you wanted to maintain that and keep your property tax revenue as a steady source of income, then you wouldn't hold a truth in taxation hearing and you'd allow that rate to be the variable.
So in a down economy, the county would, or the state would hold, the county would hold the dollars the city would receive the same, correct? Yeah. If we did not hold the tax. So that was one of the questions going back and forth, and that's why we have to hold the hearing.
Right. And so, yes, it forces a city to have the conversation every year about what they want to do with that tax rate. Essentially, if you don't hold a truth in taxation hearing and property values go up, then you're automatically seeing a rate decrease. In a down economy, all of that kind of shifts a little bit, but those are the three numbers that end up being variable. And if you hold one, the others end up adjusting. Typically, the amount received is what's held. What we're saying as an ongoing philosophy is the idea of holding the rate. However, even the cities that take that into account as a philosophy and say we would like to hold the rate, they're still looking at it every year and saying, does it make sense to hold that exact same rate based on economic factors? So the simple explanation is that you maintain the rate. I think that's the easiest way to say it. But even with that philosophy, there'd be an annual look. Mac, did you have more to explain on that?
I think you covered it pretty well. It is a philosophy, and it is important to look at it every year. If your philosophy is under normal situations, under normal economic conditions, you would try and hold the rate, and that's your philosophy. But just like with the coronavirus this year, there's a whole lot of things that we have to change, and no matter what our philosophy is, you have to rethink for this one particular year, what is it you want to do. You always, as you establish philosophy, you go through that, but as you said, you make sure that it still makes sense in your discussions each year on the budget. That's your guiding principle, that this is what you'd like to proceed. But if you have a significant upswing that's totally unexpected or significant downswings, then the council needs to just come in and make a decision year by year as to what you want to do for that particular year. It doesn't change the philosophy to go away from it slightly for 1 year every so often, but it is the guiding philosophy.
I'd like to add that if the philosophy is to hold the rate and there's a down economy and the property values go down, the council holding a truth in taxation and saying we want to maintain that rate is essentially adopting the downturn of the economy. You're decreasing people's property tax by holding the rate because the value would drop. If you don't hold the rate in a down economy, then the rate actually will adjust up so that you get the same amount. So in a down economy or in an up economy, you're simply holding your rate so that the economy does its work. Again, Quinn brings up there's reasons why at times that can break down, and there's a reason why it's structured the way it is. But that is the greatest way for a city to allow essentially property taxes to go down, the amount paid to go down. If in a down economy you hold the rate, your value drops, the amount you pay will drop as well because the value drops. In a down economy where you don't hold a truth in taxation and maintain the rate, then your rate will adjust up so you get the same amount. So you actually don't adjust with a down economy when you don't hold the rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Councilmember Windsor was kind of mentioning that, just to stay consistent. So, which I agree with. I think it's good for our voters to know kind of and plan for consistency and what this means. So just something to take into consideration with that consistency is what the market's doing. So thank you for answering that question.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Petty.
So I just wanted to weigh in on this. I don't think this is something that we have to address right away either, but I feel like we should lean towards option 3, move that direction for that consistency. So we know how to budget and plan appropriately. So that would be what I would suggest, but not at this time.
Okay, so I think we're all on the same page with that. Do we need to determine when we will bring this up again? Dave, you have some questions.
Yeah, I'd like to understand what this idea of don't do it now, but wait, because here's the timeline for adopting a budget. By state law, we have to have a tentative budget adopted in May. By state law, we then have to have a final budget adopted in June. If we are looking to hold a truth in taxation hearing, then we are able to wait to do that final adoption until August, because you have the truth in taxation hearing in August. So we are in the midst of preparing a budget. We definitely have time to talk through this. But I need, as we prepare the budget, we need to understand, because it's all based on our revenue projections. And so I'd just like to understand what wait means based on that timeline.
Okay, let's go with Councilman Windsor and then Halverson.
Thanks. I think the direction I'm hearing from the council, Dave, is option 2 right now, which is not hold a truth and taxation hearing. You're letting the rate erode this coming year. So as you prepare the draft of budget, you proceed forward with that philosophy that we're going to maintain the tax income that we received this year for next year. Establish your budget based upon that. And then we can have this discussion when we adopt the draft budget. We can then have this discussion with the public hearing with the public as they review their budget. But right now, what I'm hearing council says for this year, we're not going to hold a truth and taxation hearing, but we want to revisit this probably annually and gravitate toward option 3. So for this year, no truth and taxation hearing. It's more option 2. None of us are purporting option 1, which is wait 30 years before we have this discussion. It's more like, let's wait a year, 2, maybe 3, but let's at least wait 1 year, come back and revisit this discussion. Maybe the public hearing comes up and they say, no, we want you to do option 3. Okay, I doubt it, but maybe that's an option. But for right now, I don't think we project any additional revenue for property taxes based upon existing properties. We hold to the property tax revenue that last year's rate increase brought in for this year's budget development. If someone disagrees with what I'm hearing, please correct me.
I agree with what Wayne was just saying. I was going to make a similar point. So I think, Dave, we budget based on our current tax rate or revenue without a truth and taxation hearing.
Agreed.
Councilman Soderquist?
Yeah, the only additional comment I'd put, is if we have to have it by a certain point for your budget, like you're talking August, I mean, right now we can't really have a truth in taxation live hearing with people's input. So we need to put it off anyway. That's my only, comment suggestion is we bring it up, next year or after we get past this quarantine time, because I'm not sure we can really have a good truth and taxation hearing with the public's input.
Okay, I believe Councilman Halverson, did you have another comment or are you just, okay. And
I just like my hand up. I'm sorry.
okay, Dave, so I believe the direction is to hold off this year, revisit it again for next fiscal year, and just determine if we are ready to make a move or not. Is that the consensus? Okay. All right. You have your direction then, or not direction. So, all right. Let's move to the procurement policy update. The city's procurement policy was last updated in 2016. The Admin Finance Committee has taken approximately 1 year reviewing, discussing, and working to update the policy. They have updated and added some definitions, adjusted the authorization limits, and clarified the purchase and surplus processes, and feel the policy is ready for full council review and discussion. And I'm going to first turn that over to Councilman Windsor in case he has anything to add to that.
I think Quinn wanted to start us out first.
Okay, Councilman Soderquist.
Okay, well, I just want to acknowledge that the prior Admin Finance Committee has done a very thorough job of going through this. I'm new to this council or this committee, but I support all of the changes that are there. Councilman Windsor has been involved with it throughout. And so I've invited him to give us an update on the various changes and the importance of what we've done. So Councilman Windsor, if you take, I'd appreciate that.
I got my hand raised down there, okay?
I'm sorry about that, Councilman Soderquist. I apologize.
And while I do this, Dave, could you turn to the packet and pull up the clean version of the proposed procurement policy document? And as he's doing that, council, the Finance and Administration Committee has been discussing this policy for it's actually almost been 2 years. And it started from some identification in the then existing policy that were inconsistent with the state procurement code. And as we started diving into that, we found some areas for clarification and provide staff sort of further direction. We've put the document in a form we think is complete and thorough. And at this point in time, wanted to present it to the council for their review and answer any questions they might have before this would come back for a vote to either table, deny, or go back to the drawing boards or approve it. As you go through, I just want to point out a few things. As the mayor mentioned, we did add a significant amount of definitions. One of the key things we did here is we defined a chief procurement officer in section 2-1-040. It discusses what a chief procurement officer's roles and responsibilities are. In brief, it's basically the city manager is the chief procurement officer, and all procurement code and procedures needs to flow through him. Now, he may delegate some of his responsibilities, but that's what that section discusses. The next one, section 2-1-050, is a key discussion point I hope the council will consider tonight, and that is the authorization limits. This is one of the more significant changes from the previous policy to this one. And as you read through that, it talks about the authorization. This policy, if approved, is the council giving authorization, if you will, to department heads and the chief procurement officer to make procurements up to a dollar amount. And we've listed the dollar amounts as department heads, $4,999, and the chief procurement officer, I'm kind of blocked out here, but over 5,000. And then the next, and so hopefully we have some discussion there about those limits. If you're comfortable with those limits, the previous policy had them down like $100 and $500. And after that, everything had to come back to the city council. And that just seemed to be laborious and everything having to come back to the city council. We thought we need to invoke some trust in staff. And so the rest of the document puts together the procedures we want staff to go through in order to make these procurements. The next section, 2-1060, discusses the procurement process. And this is the bulk of this policy or this document. It identifies basically there's 6 procurement processes, but really there's 3 that will be the go-to procedures. Paragraph A talks about small purchases, and this is a new item taken mostly from the state procurement code. The dollar amounts have changed. I think the state procurement code is 50,000. We chose to come down to purchases for 25,000 or less, and it defines what staff can do, department heads and the city manager, for $1,000 up to 5,000, up to 25,000. It talks about small purchase thresholds. You can't keep going back to a single vendor over and over and over again and exceed $25,000. You have to use another vendor. You can't artificially subdivide a procurement into multiple items just to fall under the $25,000 limit, and rules such as that. For anything that's above 25,000, we talk about those as large purchases. That's your paragraph B. That's basically bidding. You go out to bidding. One of the key items embedded in here is the procurement of design professional services, which by state procurement is your architects, engineers, landscapers are the main 3. And they say in there, you cannot use costs as a criteria for selecting design professional services. Other professional services you can. So that's one of the clarifications in here. We're going through the request for proposals and what criteria you can use to select your vendors or your equipment or your professionals. Paragraph C talks about what we call exempt purchases. These are basically your state contracts. For those who don't know, the state actually goes out and solicits state contracts for procurement of different items. And so if staff would rather, and in lieu of going out and getting multiple quotes for a certain item, they would go to the state contract. And if they go to the state contract, they've already taken the competition out of that process. So if you go to a state contract for a pump and find somebody on the state contract and pump, you can then order that pump off the state contract. And this lists those procedures for doing just that. The other procurement items, although important, but would be used on a lesser scale, are sole source, interlocal agreements, and emergency procurements. Outside of those basic paragraphs, there are some clarifying and clarification paragraphs and procedures throughout the remaining document. But that's the meat of what this is trying to do. Establish roles and responsibilities, authorization limits, and procedures in which staff go about procuring goods and services on behalf of the city. So after that, I stand to answer any questions. Quinn and I can answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Windsor. I'm sorry, I don't have the comments up. I lost power for just a second. If you have your hand raised, go ahead and comment.
I'll go ahead. I mean, and the authorization limits are what kind of where I focus most of my thoughts on this. And I guess it goes back to our discussion earlier, and maybe I need to address this to Dave. I don't want to also give a city manager, a department head, too much rope to hang themselves, like we've had in a couple instances in the past. Dave, would you have felt comfortable buying the ambulance tonight without city council approval? I know we're $1, but they could have lowered that $1 and we would have met the threshold.
Comfortable is a really good term there. I would prefer that the council's involved in conversations of that magnitude.
Actually, it's a good question, Blair. They wouldn't have been able to because it would have been a sole source. It wouldn't have been a small purchase because they didn't have multiple quotes or multiple vendors. And as a sole source, they would have had to bring that back to the city council for approval anyways.
Okay. And I do agree we needed this in a bad way, because there's some things that were coming to city council I felt like should just be at daily activities. I thought the limits went up a little higher than they maybe should have, but I'm open to other suggestions. I know we need these, and I trust our current city staff, but I also don't want to give them too much to get themselves in trouble as well.
And that's what we wanted to bring it back. It's just that very question Quinn and I had is, are these the right amounts? And I'll say the previous committee, we debated back and forth for almost a year as to what those numbers are. They are a little higher than what I originally had thought, but we thought, let's settle on those numbers and bring it back to the council and see where that resides. So if you've got some alternative suggestions, please bring those forward so that we can consider those as we move this forward.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just finish your thought.
Go ahead.
Okay. We've got Mark McCray and then Councilman Soderquist.
I was just going to address the issue of the ambulance. The ambulance wasn't a specific line item or mentioned item in the budget. And so if it isn't in the budget specific, if it on capital purchases like that, if it's not in the budget, then we can't, even under the new one, just go ahead and do it. These are for items that have been budgeted and talked about before. The reason, and you postponed it into next year's budget, which is the type of things that will be listed specifically in next year's budget. So even if it's under the 15,000, but it's a larger piece of equipment that's not budgeted, I would still think those would still come back to the council.
And Mark, I agree with that. If the city council's smart enough to pick that up all the time, you know what I mean? If they just get used to buying something that's, say, a department head at $4,000, we may not always pick that up because it didn't need our approval, that it wasn't budgeted for.
And see, that's why we put the responsibility on the chief procurement officer to assure both the city council that staff are following all the procedures as he presents things to the council. That's an administrative thing that we hold him accountable for following these procedures. And one of those.
And I agree. That's why I asked Dave if he was comfortable with those limits, because the responsibility falls right back on his shoulders.
Councilman Soderquist.
So my comment was just, as Wayne mentioned, the limits, we want your feedback on. I mean, Wayne indicated that we've already brought them lower than what the state is recommending in some areas. So, we're not glued to those. The other comment I'd say though is even though those limits are there, if at any point the city manager, wants to bring it to the city council, he still can. We can't, we're not going to say, oh, that's below the limit, don't bother us about it. If he wants extra buy-in or wants extra discussion about something, that opportunity is still there.
Dave.
Sorry, as the host, I don't have the opportunity to make the little blue hand show up. So you got to see my actual hand. I want to answer your question a little bit more directly, Blair. From the very beginning, when 15,000 was the discussion point for whether the city manager was comfortable, I've had two thoughts. One is I felt uncomfortable at that level personally. But I don't know if it's about me personally. It's more about thinking of procurement in general. If it was me personally, I would probably bring that down to closer to 10, so that the department head was 5 and the city manager was 10. But as I think about it in terms of procurement policy itself, I think the idea is what are the types of purchases and the dollar amount of administrative type purchases that don't need to burden the council's time? What does the council want to just hand over to staff? Not me personally, but again, to staff, to the city manager, to the procurement officer. And with that as the thinking, I can see how 15,000 is still in the ballpark. But even with that, I personally think that dropping that down to closer to 10,000 is more in line with other elements of our policy. We have $10,000 as the threshold for capital assets in another section of the policy. And so those lining up, I think is probably advantageous. It aligns in my own head and seems to make sense that if it's a capital purchase, that probably is something that the council should consider rather than just having staff consider. But as policy, I think it really is about where is the council feeling comfortable in terms of what's an administrative decision versus what is a purchase that the council should authorize. Obviously, the budget discussion happens first, and then the conversation is to actually go out and make that purchase. I think that there's an argument for 15,000 from a procurement policy. The council doesn't need to be burdened, but I do think that 10 is probably a better number if you had to nail me down for one.
Thanks, Dave, and so Wayne, you asked me about the numbers, and I'm sorry jumping in probably in front of somebody, but I would have probably put the department head around 5 and city manager around 10. So I would agree with Dave's comments. So thank you, Dave.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Are there other comments?
I would agree with that. And I was looking at that exact same limit as well, 5 to 10,000 for the city manager. But I just want to say I appreciate all the work that was put in for this. This was no small feat to go through this entire procurement policy. So thank you, Wayne and Quinn, for doing that, because that's a huge benefit to our city to have this updated. So thank you.
Thank you for saying so. You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilwoman Alberts.
Andrew took the words out of my mouth. Thank you guys so much for your hard work. I know that this is a lot, and it is very thoroughly done. And those limits that were mentioned by Blair and Angie, I feel better about as well. So same page.
Okay, and I echo those sentiments as well. I've been in a few of those meetings, and it's no small task that, Wayne's been at this for a year, and Quinn has recently come on, and and both have done a great job. Appreciate all their work. So with that said, I guess the change, it seems the consensus is that the city manager would be allowed 10,000. It'll go 10,000, then 5,000. Correct? As we'll adjust those.
199 for department heads and then 10,000 even for the city manager. We'll make those changes, and I think we'll bring that back at our future council meeting for consideration. Would be what I would recommend to Quinn as a committee chair to bring back to you, Mayor.
Okay.
We'd like you to take a look through it and see if there's any other things that you want us to change as well.
Yeah. Are there any other changes tonight that anyone has still?
I read it all. I thought it looked great. So I don't have any recommendations for it.
You got insomnia now? Really? You read it
Yes.
That
Hey,
cured.
I read it when I couldn't sleep. It put me back to sleep, but I did read it. I have no further suggestions.
I deal with that every day.
I would suggest that we make the changes and bring it back to the next city council meeting for approval.
Okay, Dave, you got that?
Yeah, we'll put it on the April 14th agenda as an action item with those changes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, the 2020 legislative review and recap. That's kind of been put on the back burner. I don't know if there has been a recap. Dave, have you looked into that? Or Wayne, do you have any comments on legislative review?
No, the idea was that this was going to happen right after the legislative session, and we'd have a chance to just do kind of a final wrap up if there were final thoughts on it. But at this point, I think that we're past the legislative session. There, I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. Yes.
I got one thing. It's somewhat related to the legislative session, and it's also related to the meeting minutes we just approved for the February 25th meeting. If you recall, we were to revisit the discussion on the transportation utility fee collection. We talked about it in February that we were going to wait till after the legislation session as to how they ruled on that change, what we were going to do moving forward. I know it's not on the agenda to talk about right now, but we did say in the meeting minutes we were going to bring it back on March 21st. Obviously, we didn't have that meeting, so it's something we need to move forward. Do we just status quo, or if we're going to do something different, we need to have that discussion. Didn't hear what the legislative session did on that particular one. I thought they tabled it for the most part, and they're going to talk about it in the interim is the last I heard. I don't know if you have an update on that, Dave.
Yeah, the one bill that changed the wording in the transportation utility fee definition to remove the two words "or tax," that passed. But that was the only legislative change regarding transportation utility fees. A couple meetings back, I believe that maybe it was during the report section. It wasn't a true item, or maybe it was during the legislative review. I'm not sure. I do recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the council said based on that action, they felt like we didn't need to make any changes to how we're operating with transportation utility fee, that we were to proceed as we're currently proceeding until the next legislative session when and the interim, there's going to be definitely conversations about this. And at that point, we would then revisit, but there wasn't really a change based on the legislative session. And so I recall that brief dialogue about just continue doing what we're doing. But if we need to bring that back as a specific item, then let's do that if you council wants it.
Well, if you will, I would go back to look at the February 25th meeting notes, page 10 of 12, and you'll see where it's written right in there that we were tabling it, or we were not going to do any changes until March 21st, I think is what it said, or March 28th. So I think as a council, we did say we wanted to revisit it and shore it back up. So
I think we should just put it back on as a discussion item at one of our next meetings.
I agree.
Maybe we can put that on the next meeting on the 14th.
Okay. Thank you. As Fires reports. Oh, new business. Does anyone have any new business to bring up?
I just had a quick
Councilman Windsor.
question. Oh,
Councilman Windsor, and then Councilwoman Alberts, and then Councilwoman Petty.
The new business I had was to bring up what Blair, I had the same notes. See what Blair is on my notes? With the slowdown in the economy and the logic and the logical assumption that our sales tax revenue is going to go down, we should probably have some discussion as to how do we want staff to manage what we perceive to be a decrease in revenue coming in for the remainder of this fiscal year. That is a discussion we probably need to have, if not today, in the future meeting.
Thank
Do we
you.
need to does the finance committee need to meet on that, or do you want to do that as a whole council?
Dave, what do you think?
I was going to say that we're currently, as staff, trying to prepare the compiled budget based on the committee work to bring forward as a budget workshop on the 14th as well. So we were intending in the next city council meeting to have a discussion about budget workshop, which I think would lend itself to that discussion. If we're not ready for that, then we were thinking of pushing that back to the 28th. But as staff, we were anticipating bringing the entire budget back for the first look for the entire council to look at all the different elements, all that committee work to come and be combined for discussion. So I think that could easily be accomplished in that currently planned agenda item on the 14th.
Okay, we'll wait for that then. Councilwoman Alberts and then Councilwoman Petty.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something that came in on all those emails, and something that I think we discussed as a council at the beginning of this kind of quarantine is discussing essential, not discussing the non-essential business, or I don't know the way to say that right now, but is that something other cities are looking into? Is that something that we need to look into during this time of quarantine?
I can certainly talk to other cities and see what they're doing. The governor, he didn't discriminate. He said, we'd like you to carry on business as usual as much as possible. But that obviously is a city decision one way or another. Are there other comments on that?
Oh, go ahead, Wayne. Are you raising your hand? No.
Councilwoman Alberts.
How do we determine what is essential and what is non-essential? What would be the formula for that?
And that would be one of the questions that I would ask.
that's my question also. Obviously, you guys know how I feel. I don't feel like we should stop city business. I mean, for example, the procurement of the ambulance we just did, that would some people call that essential or non-essential. We have an ambulance, but this is this time sensitive thing. So it's kind of hard to determine what is essential and what is not, because that totally varies from person to person. I feel like we should continue to do businesses as usual. People are still reaching out and we can still get the information, and they're still absolutely willing to call us or email us or anything like that with any concern that they have. But I truly feel like if we just stop everything, that we are ultimately doing a disservice to everyone. So I hope people are taking that for the spirit that I'm trying to convey, because I'm not trying to make people feel like I'm shutting them out. My opinion is, if we don't continue with business, then we are just not going to trudge through this successfully, but it's actually going to take us months to catch up. And with all the time we put into the general plan, there's still things that we haven't been able to do. We've been playing catch up almost, because we've done general plan meetings almost once a month. So I feel like if we pursue not business as usual, that it's really not going to be beneficial for us at all in the long run. So that's me. One voice.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Petty. Councilman Halverson.
My personal opinion is that we allow the mayor and Dave to set the agenda and decide what's essential business. I mean, obviously, we've decided we can table the general plan a little bit. But I think that's basically your decision, Mayor, to set the agenda. And I'll leave that up to your decision. But I think we can conduct business as usual personally.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Windsor.
Just as clarification to what Blair said and others said, I think the essential business is we need to pay our bills. We need to keep the city functioning. If I was to use examples like tonight, the procurement policy, that wouldn't be something I would consider essential. It's important, but I don't think we would have had to have necessarily done it. It's a good thing that we did, but as long as we pay the bills, I think the budget and getting the public's draft budget prepared so they can consider it, because we are under current state mandates to meet certain schedules. Now, the governor may change this, but we do need to invite the public. We do need to value the public's input and provide them the opportunity. So those things that are necessary for the public to input, we need to make sure we can get that input, and just not the emails, because others need to hear what the public are saying. Sending emails and then attaching them to the minutes is a voice, but not everyone's getting to hear that voice. So we need to conduct business, but we need to be frugal in how we do that. And yes, it's the mayor's decision as to what's on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Windsor. Let's go with Councilman Soderquist and then back to Councilman Halverson if you have something.
Blair likes his hand up, but that's okay. No, I just agree with the comments that have been made. You know, it's difficult to decide what's essential and what's not. The only other comment is if we're meeting and we have the opportunity to talk through an idea that's not essential, but can easily be done and doesn't really require, a lot of discussion, to me, it seems kind of counterproductive to put off every non-essential thing if we're already meeting. And I don't want to discuss things, and move forward with things that need the community's input. But at the same time, if we're meeting, we can make good use of our meeting. We'd hate to meet for one item and then table everything else, even though it could be addressed. But again, I agree with comments that we defer to the mayor and city manager to identify the agenda. And if we think it's not essential for whatever reason, when we look at the agenda, then we can state that up front, make a decision quickly and drop it from the discussion if need be.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for all of your input. And, we will continue to monitor that, but try to continue to do business as usual. And unless we have a case similar to tonight's that we need to make an adjustment for, possibly, then we'll consider that. So appreciate that. All right. New business, did we get all that? Oh, yeah, Councilwoman Petty, that's right.
I couldn't reach my hand button. So I just had a couple of residents ask about fiber and where we're at. And I am no longer part of the Municipal Utilities Committee. I don't know if there's been any meetings or discussion of moving that forward, but I have had people reach out to me asking me kind of our status on that and if that's still something the city is considering.
Okay, Councilman Windsor.
Yeah, we miss you on the committee, Angie, but we've not made any steps forward either way. Last we left it was, this is a bigger issue that's going to require a lot of public involvement. Some things we've tossed around might be having, I don't want to call them public debates, but public discussions where we have two opinions, pro-fiber, anti-fiber. For the public who's listening, it's not clear cut. There's not a clear decision as to how the city proceeds. We can get into the details, but it's a bigger issue as to who provides it, how it's provided, who has to pay the costs. We're talking millions of dollars, either from the city's pocketbook that gets passed on to the public, or through a vendor that we pay in perpetuity, for a long time. Utopia, that option was brought up several times. The issue there is they have to have a certain take of the city, and a take is a certain percentage of the people have to sign up for that. And if that doesn't happen, the city has to flip the bill for those who don't sign up. Bringing in a third party or the city to build its own fiber system is to require like a $12 to $15 million bond just to bring in the infrastructure, but we manage it as our own utility. There's a lot of pros and cons, and there's nothing set right now, but I think that's a question, a debate that has to come up in the near future. I know there's a lot of people who run businesses from their home who would benefit from a faster service, yet there are many in the community who don't want it or don't need it. So how do you balance those two needs? The committee needs to get together and discuss moving that item forward. And I think it's going to take a lot of public discussion as to which option we want to embrace, if any of them. And maybe there's a third technology out there, but we haven't forgotten about it. I'll put it to you that way.
Okay, thank you for the update. And I missed that committee too, just for the record.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Petty. Then if we're done with new business, we'll move to council and staff reports. I just be aware, and I've already announced this, that I believe in the morning tomorrow, the Davis County Health will issue a health order for the county, and I will get that information out to you as soon as possible. I don't think I have anything else, so if we could go to Councilman Halverson.
Just the Public Safety Committee will be meeting tomorrow to get an update from Chief Tolman and on what other areas are doing to prepare for what we're going through. I think we're blessed that we don't have as many known patients here in South Weaver, but we're obviously going to have some. So I think it'll be a great education for the Public Safety Committee, the mayor and Dave, to meet with Chief Tolman to do that. And that's via Zoom. We're not meeting together in a room. So other than that, we have nothing to report. I have nothing else to report. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you. Councilwoman Alberts.
I don't have anything.
All right. Councilman Soderquist.
You heard our report from the admin finance. I don't have any other essential things to discuss at this time.
Okay, thanks. Councilwoman Petty.
Just one item to report. I've been working with Mark Larson about updating the bathrooms at Cherry Farms Park. So that's in the work. We made kind of a checklist of things that need to be addressed and we can do to improve. So that is to be coming forward.
All right, thank you. Councilman Windsor.
The committee has no items to report, but as a point of non-essential business, while we were talking tonight, Boise was hit with a 6.5 earthquake.
Oh, wow. All right, thank you. Councilwoman Alberts, I apologize. Mark Larson sent out an email about the Country Fair Days, and I hope that's been forwarded to you since. I told him that you were the liaison with that committee.
Yes, I got that earlier this afternoon.
Okay, I don't know if you've spoken to the chairs about the possibility of the train running one day during that time.
We did meet. We discussed a lot of ideas for Country Fair Days. I think that was one of the ideas suggested, but as far as any form or plan or anything, that has not occurred to my knowledge as of yet.
Okay. All right. I know they're aware of the idea we have and the possibility of that. So, but if you could, next time you speak with the chairs, if you could bring that up.
I will reach out to them tonight and see if they have any further ideas so we can prepare for that, if so.
Okay, because I saw a calendar of events and I don't believe it was listed.
Okay.
And so, yeah, if you could talk to them about that, I'd appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, Dave.
The only thing I'd like to report is that City Hall operations continue to take place. Obviously, the doors are closed in terms of the public showing up. However, city operations are still taking place, and we're adjusting and adapting on an operational level as well as a legislative level. And so far, so good. Had a great staff meeting today, again via Zoom, and talked through a whole bunch of different things. And there's just a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things adjusting each day. We're heavily involved and aware of the larger conversation going on with COVID response, meetings with the county, meetings with the state, meetings with the league. There's quite a bit of information that is discussed and passed. Some of that directly affects the actions that the city needs to take, but a lot of that I'm trying to filter the best I can so that you hear what is needed from a legislative standpoint and an operational standpoint versus an administrative standpoint. But just know that there's quite a bit of information that's flowing that way. One of those pieces of information that came within the last 24 hours is that the landfill will be closing this Thursday for residential customers. So if people drive up and want to drop stuff off at the landfill, they're going to close for those types of customers. It will remain open for municipal customers and other contracted customers that they have. But they're going to close this Thursday for residential drop off. They have had, they said, thousands of people on weekends coming and congregating there at the landfill. So in an effort to support the governor's directive to stay safe, stay home, the landfill is going to be closing as of Thursday for residential customers only.
Yeah, this comes at bad timing because everybody's wanting to prune their trees and clean up for spring, but you do what you can do. So Michelle, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I just need Councilman Windsor to repeat what he was reporting. I can't hear him very well. He's not sitting right next to me, so I can't hear him. So if he could just repeat that.
If I stand closer, would that help?
Yes, that is better.
Nothing noteworthy to report. I just said in non-essential business, Boise, Idaho was struck with a 6.5 earthquake. It's not anything that needs to be put in the meeting minutes.
Okay. All right. And then Mayor, I was wondering if you could just reiterate for individuals who may think that the city is meeting illegally or whatever, just the misconception out there. If you could just state again what Governor Herbert has said about cities meeting.
Yes, okay. Governor Herbert, and I can't remember the date of that, but he issued an executive order that allows cities to meet electronically and to carry on business as usual as much as possible. And that was given, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, Dave? I can't remember. But many cities are following suit. So, Dave, do you know when that was?
I don't recall the exact date either. We could go look that up though.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could look that up for the record if you'd like.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Alberts, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is the spring cleanup still on or has that been canceled as well?
I'm pretty sure we're not doing spring cleanup. Dave, do you have?
Well, at this point, because it's scheduled for the end of April, we haven't announced whether we're holding it or not holding it. The plan is simply to have bins available that people could come drop off. There hasn't been a specific decision yet on whether it's canceled. So we're still looking at ways to try to hold it, maintain social distancing, things like that. But I think we'll know a whole lot more after the county health order tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the landfill would still be open for dumping of those large bins, would it be, Dave? Would that be considered?
Right. Yes, the landfill would still work with communities on that large of a level, as well as the weekly pickup, curbside pickup will not be altered. That won't be affected at all.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see, Brandon, you've been very quiet. Do you have anything to report?
I was just going to let you know that our office is also closed. Everybody's been able to relocate to working from home or in an isolated situation. But we are still moving forward on all of our projects as best we can. And then I also just wanted to let you know that I was talking to Parsons today. They have been moving forward on Old Fort Road, and the remaining portion to be paved will be ready towards the end of April. So they're getting pretty close on that, weather pending.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. If you happen to speak to Bruce Nilsson or anyone dealing with that, that development, I have been keeping tabs, but I was given word that the park, the detention basin fenced portion of that would be complete sometime by the end of June. I just want to make sure you're aware of that so that you can update us if and ask them as you speak to them how that is coming and push it along.
Sure, and I can reach out to them. I have not spoken with them for some time, so I can reach out and see what their schedule is currently looking like.
That would be great. Thank you. All right, Lisa, did you have anything? Maybe Lisa's not with us, so Michelle, any other questions? Did you say no?
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. Mark, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to update the council. It's kind of Brandon's thing, but I've been working with him and he's got all the paperwork done to wrap up the sidewalk project, and everything has been turned into the state. So we're hoping to get a significant check for the 75% of that project shortly. A lot of work has been done by Brandon, and I'm making sure that all our records match his, but he has submitted that, and we're looking forward to that, which comes to about $300,000 reimbursement on the sidewalk when the checks finally get here.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, if there are no other comments, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have a question real quick. Was that for the South Weaver Drive sidewalks, Mark? Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Dave.
The executive order from the governor was March 18th.
There you go, Michelle, March 18th.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.